The Young and the Restless spoilers. Friday's full episodes update July 11, 2025. In the cavernous quiet of the chateau's east wing, where the air was perfumed with old secrets and brandy-soaked ambition, the night took a darker, more dangerous turn. Cain Ashby, once the calculated mastermind of a grand conquest over Genoa City's corporate elite, now paced the marble floors with the energy of a caged animal. His mind was unraveling, thread by thread, as he sensed the walls of control closing in. The empire he had meticulously plotted to build with seduction, betrayal, and power plays was beginning to fracture, and at the heart of it was a betrayal he had never prepared for, not from the Newmans or from Jack Abbott, but from Lily Winters, the woman who had once been his anchor in a world built on quicksand. What began as a dream, a fleeting, sultry whisper of lips against Damien Cain's in a shadowed corridor, transformed into an obsession Lily could no longer ignore. She had dreamed of him before, yes, but this time it was different. She felt the electric burn of desire even as she pulled away in her subconscious, only to open her eyes and find Cain's face lingering behind her eyelids, cold and accusing. Confused, shaken, and overwhelmed by the symbolic weight of the moment, she slipped out of bed, wrapped herself in a silk robe, and wandered into the manicured maze outside the estate. Her feet moved instinctively, drawn by impulse, her heart hammering beneath the thin fabric of memory and temptation. Unbeknownst to her, Cain was watching. Hidden in his surveillance suite, surrounded by feeds from every corner of the estate, he followed her movements with predatory precision. The camera captured her slipping deeper into the maze, her hair brushing against rose bushes, her fingers grazing stone walls. His jaw tightened. The woman he had once loved, the woman he still believed could be reclaimed, was drifting further out of reach. Something about her posture disturbed him. It wasn't panic, it wasn't disorientation. It was freedom. And that terrified him. He slammed the monitor with the flat of his palm, knocking over a half-finished tumbler of scotch. The idea that Lily might find clarity, or worse, comfort, outside of him sent a pulse of rage through his chest. But the game shifted again, crueler this time. Just as Cain was preparing to step outside, to find her under the guise of concern and reclaim some illusion of control, the camera flickered and refocused. Damien Cain had found her first. And as Cain watched, powerless, Lily turned toward Damien, her voice just audible through the audio link. "I need something new," she whispered, the tremble in her voice more honest than any confession she'd ever made. Then she kissed him. Not with confusion or regret, but with conviction. Cain's fingers froze over the control board. His face went pale. And somewhere, behind the stoic composure he wore like armor, a part of him shattered. Damien held her with surprising gentleness, as though understanding that Lily wasn't just running from Cain, but running toward herself. She'd been trapped too long in a cycle of forgiveness and regret, of rebuilding ruins only to have them collapse again. This was different. Damien didn't come with the weight of history. He offered possibility, and she was starving for it. But even in that vulnerable moment, as they kissed again beneath the moonlight, they weren't alone. Cole Howard had stumbled onto the scene, drawn by intuition or chance, and stopped in his tracks at the sight of Lily in Damien's arms. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply watched, devastation flickering in his eyes, before turning away silently, disappearing back into the shadows. A witness to passion not meant for him, and pain he had no right to claim. Later, back inside the chateau, Lily stood at the threshold of her room, breathless from the encounter, uncertain whether what she felt was shame or liberation. Damien stood behind her, tentative, waiting for a signal. She turned, reached up, and touched his face with trembling fingers. "I won't let Cain or his games waste another second of my life," she said. It wasn't just a declaration. It was a death sentence for whatever remained between her and Cain. She kissed Damien again, deeper this time, and when he pulled back to ask if she was sure, she answered without hesitation. "Yes. I'm sure." And then, for the first time in a long time, Lily chose herself. Elsewhere in the estate, Cain was a storm brewing in silk. He marched into the cocktail lounge, the room empty save for ghosts and liquor, and poured himself a drink with shaking hands. The scotch hit his throat like fire but did nothing to quell the inferno within. He slammed the bottle down so hard the crystal decanter cracked at the base, the sound echoing like gunfire. His eyes narrowed with unspoken rage as he reached beneath his shirt, pulling out the chain he wore like a secret talisman. From it dangled his wedding band, a symbol of promises broken, of power he thought was tethered to love, now exposed as delusion. He held it in front of him, staring at it as if daring it to speak, then let it fall onto the bar with a hollow clink that felt like a final nail driven into something long dead. Meanwhile, across the villa, a different kind of grief was blooming, quieter, but no less intense. Victoria Newman had retreated to her suite, shell-shocked and listless. The emotional toll of the past weeks, her father's silence, Claire's defiance, Cole's increasingly distant demeanor, had carved new hollows beneath her eyes. But Chelsea Lawson was there, perched at the edge of Victoria's bed like an angel with a flask. She didn't speak right away. She didn't offer solutions. She simply placed a hand on Victoria's shoulder and waited. And when Victoria finally broke, her composure crumbling beneath the weight of heartbreak, Chelsea caught her without judgment. "I don't know who I am without all of them," Victoria confessed, her voice cracking. "Without my father, my daughter, what's left of Cole." Chelsea nodded, brushing a tear from Victoria's cheek. "Maybe that's the point," she replied softly. "Maybe it's time you figure out who you are without needing any of them to define you." It was a radical notion, independence, but one that struck a chord deep within Victoria. And in that shared vulnerability, the women found a strange, unexpected alliance. Not of convenience, but of mutual survival. Two warriors scarred by loyalty, finally beginning to realize that healing might come not from reclaiming the past, but from releasing it. As dawn broke over the estate, the battle lines had been redrawn. Cain Ashby, once the architect of ambition, now stood alone in the ruins of his control, undone by the very emotions he thought he could manipulate. Lily, newly awakened to her own desires, had crossed a line she would never walk back from. Damien, still a mystery even to those closest to him, held Lily not as a conquest but as something rarer, a woman who chose him not out of desperation, but clarity. And Chelsea, perhaps the most underestimated of them all, had begun to plant seeds in Victoria that could one day grow into defiance, not against others, but against the walls they'd built around themselves for survival. The game was far from over. But the players were changing. At society, the soft candlelight danced against crystal glasses and silver cutlery as the restaurant transformed into a sanctuary of memory, longing, and love. Danny Romalotti had spared no detail in orchestrating the perfect evening. The setting was elegant but intimate, the kind of quiet luxury that whispered rather than shouted. He stood behind the open kitchen window, sleeves rolled up, stirring the sauce for his signature pasta dish. Not because he needed to impress Christine Blair with his culinary skills, but because he wanted every part of the night to be touched by his hand, his heart, his intention. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a journey, one that began decades ago, through music, heartbreak, reconciliations, and choices that had never fully pulled them apart. Tonight, Danny was ready to ask Christine to begin again, not from scratch, but from everything they already were. Christine arrived to find the room transformed into a world only they understood. No crowd, no distractions, just a table set for two, warm music playing in the background, and Danny waiting with a smile that instantly melted the years. He led her to her seat and served the pasta himself, watching her eyes light up as she recognized the smell. "You made this for me in LA once," she said, smiling. "Back when your hair was a little longer, and I was pretending not to be impressed." He chuckled, the sound rich with nostalgia. They toasted to old memories, then let the conversation drift like a gentle tide through moments shared and missed, a lifetime condensed into a single evening. Midway through dinner, Danny leaned forward, eyes earnest. "Where do you think we're going?" he asked softly. Christine looked at him, her gaze steady but kind. I don't care where we are, she said. As long as we're together. The sincerity of her words settled over Danny like warmth. This was why he had come back. This was why, after all the years, it was still Christine. Still Cricket. Still the one. Then maybe, he said, it's time we find a place, a real place, just for us. Her face lit up, surprised and visibly moved. I'd love that, she said. But the surprises weren't over. Danny reached beneath the table and pulled out a vintage guitar case, the one he had carried with him on tour after tour. From within it, not an instrument, but a collection of small boxes. Each one holding a piece of their past. I thought we could open them together, he said, like a time capsule. Only ours. The first box was shaped like a guitar pick. Christine opened it and found a small, worn pick inside. She laughed. You broke this during your second concert I ever went to. And you kept it, Danny said, teasing. No, she replied, you did. The next box held a tiny metal hammer. Symbolic of the cases she used to fight, the walls she tore down with logic and fierce compassion. I remember when you stood up to Victor, Danny said. You were terrifying. And amazing. He blinked first, Christine grinned. The next box contained a copy of a manners book and a few flashcards from her law school days, carefully preserved like relics. You used to read these to me when you were stressed, Danny said. I thought I was helping you study. Turns out, I just liked hearing your voice. Then came the most emotional box yet. Danny handed her a velvet one, rectangular, and as soon as she lifted the lid, her breath caught. Inside lay a delicate wreath, the same kind worn at their wedding in Hawaii. Her fingers trembled as she touched it. A vivid flashback overtook them both, the beach, the soft breeze, their vows under the sun. Christine closed her eyes, tears welling. I never thought I'd see this again, she whispered. Danny gently squeezed her hand. Neither did I. But some things, they don't belong in the past. They weren't done yet. The next memory unfolded as she opened a small, red velvet pouch. Inside was a tiny ornament, their first Christmas together. It was clumsy and childlike, hand-painted with their initials, chipped at the edges from being dropped too many times. Christine laughed through her tears. You broke it on New Year's Eve trying to hang it with one hand while holding me with the other. I have zero regrets, Danny grinned. That was the best New Year's kiss I ever had. Christine wiped her eyes, overwhelmed by the intimacy of it all. This is too much, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's not, Danny replied. Not for you. Not for us. Then, slowly, deliberately, he handed her the final box. It was unmarked. Christine hesitated before opening it, already knowing what it held, already feeling her chest tighten. When she finally lifted the lid, inside was a ring box. A soft gasp escaped her lips, and tears slid silently down her cheeks. She looked at Danny, who had moved beside her and dropped to one knee without preamble, without ceremony, just pure, quiet love radiating from every inch of him. You changed my life, he said simply. The moment I met you, everything that came after was shaped by you. And I know we've both lived entire lifetimes in between, but if I've learned anything, it's that I don't want to live another day where I don't come home to you. So, will you marry me? Again? Christine couldn't speak at first. Her hand shook as she covered her mouth, nodding through her tears. Yes, she finally managed. Yes. Of course, yes. The restaurant seemed to exhale with them. The world faded, and for a moment, it was just the two of them, holding hands over a ring that meant everything, not just because of what it symbolized, but because of what they had survived to get back to this moment. In a city full of power games and broken promises, this wasn't just a love story. It was a declaration that some things, some people, were worth waiting for. Danny didn't need fireworks, orchestras, or grandstanding. All he needed was this moment. The quiet air between them, the candlelight dancing in Christine's eyes, and the ring burning a hole in his pocket. After reliving every touchpoint of their past through the small tokens and flashbacks that had led them here, he reached for her hand again, and with a voice low and steady, he said, "I've always felt my best when we're together. And I don't want to spend another day of my life without you." His fingers brushed the velvet box, and with one breath, he drew it out and opened it before her. The silence was charged, heavy with emotion. Christine's eyes immediately filled with tears, her lips trembling as the weight of the moment struck her. Her voice was a whisper, cracked but radiant. "I never thought this day would come," she said, her hands shaking as they hovered over the ring. "But Danny Romalotti, I love you. So yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. I'll marry you." She leaned forward, and their lips met in a kiss that silenced the years, the doubts, the time spent apart. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss, it was something better, earned, healed, human. The kind of kiss that spoke of promises once broken and now rebuilt with gold. Outside society, the city kept moving, impatient, indifferent. But within those walls, time stopped for two people who had found their way back not just to each other, but to themselves. But elsewhere in Genoa City, beneath the weight of grief and unfinished goodbyes, another story unfolded in the hush of a darkened bedroom. Victoria Newman sat curled on her chaise, her hair unbrushed, her eyes hollow from crying until sleep overtook her. The room bore witness to her despair, untouched food, unspoken words, unanswered texts. The grief over Cole Howard's absence, physical or spiritual, had cracked open parts of her that even Newman's steel couldn't protect. She was unraveling, quietly, almost gracefully, like silk slipping off a hanger. Chelsea Lawson arrived unannounced, stepping into the room not with pity but with purpose. She knew this pain, not exactly, but close enough. She'd lived through loss, abandonment, and the hollow ache of loving someone who could no longer speak for themselves. "I'm here," she said simply. "Whatever you need, I'm here." Victoria didn't speak at first, her throat too tight, her eyes too tired. But after a moment, she whispered, "I cried myself to sleep." The admission was raw, childlike, a glimpse into the little girl who had always needed to be perfect, and now, finally, couldn't. Chelsea sat beside her, not touching, not pushing, just listening. "I know you're trying to hold it together for Claire," she said. "And I know Kyle's away, and your family, they're complicated. But Claire needs someone who's vulnerable, too. Someone who shows her that it's okay to feel." Victoria exhaled sharply, a bitter laugh slipping out. "Kyle's gone, my family's gone, she just needs someone. Someone she can break down with." But Chelsea shook her head. "No," she said gently. "You're the one who needs to break. You need to grieve. You've been trying to stay upright while carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations. But you're not a statue. You're a human being." It was those words, simple, unadorned, that finally cracked Victoria open. She sobbed, not delicately, but desperately, as though trying to scream through the silence of death. "I want to hear his voice again," she cried. "I need him here, explaining this to me. I need him to come back. I can't do this, I don't want to be alone." Her shoulders shook, and Chelsea, after a moment's hesitation, reached over and held her. Not tightly, not forcefully, just enough to say, "You're not." Eventually, the sobs turned into silence, the kind that felt less suffocating than before. Victoria sat upright again, her face blotchy, her eyes rimmed with grief, but her chest rising and falling with more steadiness. She didn't thank Chelsea with words, not yet. But the way she looked at her, the way she allowed herself to be seen in that most fragile moment, was gratitude in its purest form. "I'm sorry," Victoria whispered finally as Chelsea stood to leave. Chelsea shook her head. "Don't be," she said, her voice thick but warm. "Just remember, I'm here if you ever need to talk." She placed a hand briefly on Victoria's shoulder, then turned and left the room, leaving behind the soft echo of comfort in a house too often haunted by legacy and silence. And so the night closed gently over Genoa City, one woman reborn in love, another collapsing beneath loss, and a third standing quietly between both, offering strength without expectation. The dance of hearts, the war of emotions, and the slow, relentless tide of change continued, as it always does in a city where power is currency, and healing is the most radical act of all.